When Japanese radar operators detected an impossible aircraft flying through their airspace at midnight, they had no idea they were tracking a dead man. Lieutenant Thomas Blackburn's plane had been shot down 6 hours earlier, so who, or what, was flying his P-38 Lightning back to base? The tropical night hung heavy over Rabaul Harbor. Japanese searchlights carved geometric patterns through the darkness, hunting for American bombers that never came. It was February 19, 1944, and the fortress of Rabaul, once the jewel of Japan's South Pacific defenses, was dying slowly under relentless Allied assault. Captain Hiroshi Nakamura sat in the radar room of the Vunakanu airfield, his eyes fixed on the green glow of the oscilloscope. The night shift was usually quiet. Most American raids came during daylight hours now, when their fighters could provide cover. But at 23:47 hours, something appeared on his screen. A single aircraft, flying low, heading southeast. "Tanuki," he called to his colleague. "Single contact, bearing 135 degrees, altitude approximately 2,000 meters. Lieutenant Tanuki crossed the room quickly. "IFF signal?" "None, but the speed and altitude, it matches a P-38 Lightning." Both men fell silent. Earlier that day, a massive air battle had erupted over Simpson Arbor. American P-38s from the 475th Fighter Group, the Satan's Angels, had tangled with Japanese Zeros protecting a supply convoy. The sky had filled with tracer fire and falling aircraft. Nakamura himself had watched 3 American planes plummet into the jungle, trailing smoke and flame. "Could be a crippled aircraft," Tanuki suggested. "Pilot trying to make it home." Nakamura shook his head. "That course takes him directly toward our anti-aircraft positions at Tobera. No American pilot would risk that. They know we'll light him up." But the aircraft kept coming. At the Tobera gun batteries, Sergeant Kenji Yamamoto received the alert. His 75mm gun crew scrabbled to their positions, cranking the weapon toward the designated coordinates. The night was so dark that even with searchlights, visual contact would be difficult. "Searchlight crews, illuminate Sector 7, Yamamoto barked. 4 massive carbon arc searchlights stabbed into the sky, forming a brilliant cone of light. And there, caught in the beams like a metallic moth, was the unmistakable silhouette of a P-38 Lightning, its twin booms and central nacelle eerily beautiful against the black void. "Fire!" The 75mm gun bucked violently. The shell screamed into the night, exploding 200 meters short of the target. The P-38 didn't waver. It maintained its course and altitude with mechanical precision. "Fire again, rapid succession." Shell after shell burst around the American fighter, filling the sky with black clouds of shrapnel. Any one of those explosions should have shredded the aircraft, but the P-38 flew through the barrage as if it were passing through fog. Yamamoto felt ice water flood his veins. In 3 years of war, he'd never seen anything like this. Aircraft either took evasive action or died. They didn't simply ignore anti-aircraft fire. "What's he doing?" whispered one of the gun crew. The P-38 continued its straight line across their position, then disappeared into the darkness beyond their searchlight range. Yamamoto immediately radioed the next gun battery at Rapapo. "Single enemy aircraft heading your direction. Twin-engine fighter. We scored no hits." "No hits?" came the incredulous reply. "How many rounds?" 11. Direct trajectory. It was like shooting at a ghost. The Rapapo batteries tried next, then the guns at Lakanai. Each position unloaded everything they had at the lone P-38. Radar tracked it across the entire breadth of New Britain Island, and not a single shell touched it. At the American Air Base at Nodzab, New Guinea, ground crews were preparing for the night when they heard the distinctive sound of Allison V-1710 engines, the sound of a P-38 coming home. But it was nearly midnight, and no missions had been scheduled to return this late. Staff Sergeant Robert Chen grabbed his flashlight and ran toward the runway. The approach lights were already on, illuminating a path through the darkness. And there, descending through the humid air, was a P-38 with the distinctive markings of the 475th Fighter Group. But something was wrong. The aircraft's left engine was missing its cowling. Bullet holes stitched across the right wing. The canopy was shattered, and long black streaks of oil covered the fuselage. This aircraft had been through hell. The P-38 touched down smoothly, taxied to the dispersal area, and stopped. The engines wound down, the propellers ticking to a halt. Chen ran toward the aircraft with several other ground crew members, ready to help the injured pilot. But when they reached the cockpit and looked inside, they found it empty. Not just empty, there was no body, no blood, no sign anyone had flown the aircraft. The control stick sat centered, the throttles were at idle, and on the seat was a pair of dog tags that made Chen's blood run cold. Lieutenant Thomas K. Blackburn, 475th Fighter Group. "That's impossible," whispered Corporal Davies, who'd climbed up beside Chen. "Blackburn went down this morning over Rabaul. I saw the goddamn plane hit the water." Chen picked up the dog tags with trembling fingers. They were real. Standard U.S. military issue, stamped with Blackburn's serial number and blood type. Within the hour, the base commander, Colonel James McGuire, stood beside the P-38 listening to Chen's report. A flight surgeon examined the aircraft's interior with a flashlight. "No blood," the surgeon announced. "No physical evidence of a pilot. But these controls were definitely operated during landing. You can see the wear patterns on the stick grip and fresh rubber marks on the rudder pedals." McGuire turned to his intelligence officer, Captain Bernard Shaw. "What do we know about Blackburn's mission?" Shaw consulted his clipboard. He was part of a 4-plane element providing cover for B-25 bombers hitting Japanese shipping in Simpson Harbor. At approximately 15:30 hours, his aircraft took heavy damage from a Zero attack. Last radio transmission was him saying he was ditching in the harbor. That was 1700 hours this evening. We have 3 witnesses who saw his plane go into the water. And this aircraft landed here at 23:40 hours. 6 hours and 40 minutes later? McGuire said slowly. "Sir, there's something else." Shaw's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I just received a radio message from Navy Search and Rescue. They found Blackburn's body 2 hours ago. He was floating in Simpson Harbor, still in his life vest. The medic's preliminary exam suggests he died of wounds sustained during the aerial combat, probably never survived the water landing." The group fell silent. Around them, the New Guinea jungle whispered with night sounds, insects, distant bird calls, the rustle of wind through massive trees. But the men heard none of it. They were staring at an aircraft that flew itself across 300 miles of enemy territory through concentrated anti-aircraft fire and landed perfectly at its home base. All piloted by a dead man. Colonel McGuire made a decision. "Shaw, I want this classified immediately. Maximum security. Nobody talks about this outside of this group. Understood?" Everyone nodded. "And I want every inch of this aircraft examined. Maybe there's a mechanical explanation, some kind of autopilot malfunction that brought it home." But even as he said it, he knew it was impossible. P-38s didn't have autopilots sophisticated enough for this kind of navigation. And they certainly couldn't land themselves. Over the following weeks, Army Air Force technicians tore the aircraft apart. They found battle damage consistent with the morning's aerial combat. They found Blackburn's personal effects in the cockpit, his lucky compass, a photograph of his fiancée, and even his half-finished letter home. But they found no explanation for how the aircraft had flown itself across enemy territory and returned to base. Japanese records captured after the war confirmed the ghost flight. Radar operators tracked the aircraft across New Britain. Gun crews fired over 100 shells at it without scoring a hit. Some Japanese soldiers later reported that the aircraft seemed to flicker in and out of their searchlight beams, as if it weren't entirely real.